because that's all I can do is my music.
We are live. Good morning again at this time. We're in chapter 4. I don't know if there's any real deep theological things this morning, but today we want to just talk about God's providence for his people. When they were in Egypt, when they were in the wilderness, when they got to the promised land, kind of what were their main crops that they had, their diets and things like that. And at the end of the day, we're going to see how, and I know this is no surprise, but richly blessed we are compared to even these people who lived in that land of milk and honey, as it was called. Some of the things we have today that's a dream for them back in those days. So very, very modest diets, but God still provided. And maybe that was kind of the point. Maybe you don't need all that and just trust that I'm going to provide for you every day. But we'll get to that when we do. Basic responsibilities of parents to their children. What would you say?
Train them up in the way of the Lord.
Okay, there'd be number 1. When you know the way of the Lord, make sure they know the way of the Lord, so that when they're old, they don't depart from it. What else?
The worldly needs.
Yeah, the basic, they can't feed themselves, they can't put a roof over their head, they can't clothe themselves. There's an age where they'll be able to do that, but when they're real little, that's kind of your job, right, as a parent, to provide for their earthly needs, to provide for their worldly needs. And that really is going to be where we're headed here this morning. So in Egypt, remember, there was only 75 who went down there at the very beginning when Joseph was there, and then the brothers came down, and eventually Dad came with them, and the rest of the family. So they started at 75 and grew to probably a couple million by the time they left. Remember, they lived over in that land of Goshen, which is kind of the western Nile Delta. Over 450, that's rounding, 430 to 450 years they were there. Exodus 16, this is them complaining to God, but in their complaint, you see that they were pretty well taken care of over there. In Egypt, we sat around pots of meat. We ate all the food we wanted. Numbers 11, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, the cucumbers, the melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Boy, we had it so good over there. And now here we are out in this wilderness. If only we could go back to Egypt and eat the way we did. I'm going to skip that map because I don't like it. I should have another one. Well, here's why. They put Mount Sinai, so here's why I don't like it. But it was the best high definition map I could find. They put Mount Sinai over here and put the Red Sea crossing here. I'm more of the mindset that I believe this is where Mount Sinai is, when the Red Sea crossing happened here somewhere, probably up here more than likely. Anyway.
Where's Goshen again?
Goshen would be like here.
Way over there.
Yeah, the kind of west side of the Nile. Yeah, see this, I'm pretty sure Goshen is here. Anyway, so there's some things on this map I don't agree with. So they have it listed as here, but maybe I'm off on that if you find another map. But anyway, Goshen was a very, is it this next? Yeah, so again, this is a close-up of the Nile River Delta. And you just see how absolutely fertile this whole area is. In comparison to, if this is Mount Sinai, and even if this was Mount Sinai, that's like night and day, right? Here's what we had here, and you look at that on a satellite map. There ain't nothing out there, right? You ain't growing anything, you're not, there is nothing to eat out there in the wilderness. So again, it makes you kind of see sinfully saying, but why they would say in Egypt we had everything. Now out here we have nothing. Hey God, let's get on with this and get us to the land of milk and honey that you promised as we wander out here in the wilderness. Someone want to read Nehemiah 9 there? Thank you, Susie.
Because of your great compassion, you did not abandon them in the desert. By day the pillar of cloud did not cease to guide them on their path, nor the pillar of fire by night to shine on the way they were to take. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths, and you gave them water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the desert. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet become swollen.
Yeah, so again, as you look at this, you say that That's a God thing, that all that stuff was provided for not just a week or 2 weeks or a month, but for 40 years wandering around that Sinai Peninsula. Amazing grace. So, again, by point of comparison, look at the satellite view of our country.
Oh, jeez.
Fertile, right? Beautiful, green. This isn't taken in winter, obviously. not the same looking in January. That compared to this. It's how richly blessed we are. To live where we live, in the times we live, go to the grocery store and we complain when sriracha's out of stock. There's 3 other sriracha, at least I knew. There's been a sriracha shortage. My hot sauce, something with the peppers in Mexico. So now I have to use generic sriracha and the first world problems I have.
It can be make your own.
You can make your own, that's true. Okay. So, how long is food going to last for a couple million people in the desert? Again, just do that math, right? I mean, think of your Pioneer. How many kids do you serve in your Pioneer? A couple hundred and 300?
200.
Yeah, and all the work that's put into that, all the food you have to buy, and now multiply 200 by whatever to get to 2 million. That's a lot of food, right?
Must have been a lot of quail flying around there.
Yeah, well, so yeah.
Very good.
They are very good.
So they run out, right? Whatever they did, remember the Egyptians kind of said, here, take our stuff and just go. So they did have a bunch of food with them when they first left, but it didn't last long, wandering around in that wilderness. And in Exodus 16, where we get to this section about the man and the quail, we're told at twilight you will eat meat. And that evening, quail came and covered the camp. So again, yeah, how many quail would that be to feed 2 million people? Just to fall out of the sky, right? Just birds just dropping. There they are.
At least 1 million quail per each. And the guys will eat 2, 3.
How big is a quail?
No. Yeah. It's like a little bit bigger than I'd say a dove.
So like a,
Or about the size of a dove.
Individually sized chicken?
Yeah, it's like a Cornish hen. Not even as big as a Cornish hen.
yeah.
Not even as big as a Cornish
They're
hen.
good.
So realistically, maybe if you're not eating the way we eat, could that feed 2 people? If you're on sort of a if you're smaller people on a smaller diet,
It may.
maybe. Yeah.
Might.
So, yeah, let's say 1 million birds. And just the fact that, talk about a miracle, just that many birds every day just falling from, like, it's one thing if, and then 10 birds fell from the sky and they all, 1 million of them. Crazy. And they still weren't happy. Apparently that wasn't enough. So then we hear in Exodus 6 or 16, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. That's the Hebrew for what is it? Manhu. What is it? Exodus 16 tells us it was like white coriander seed, tasted like wafers made with honey. I kind of think of our communion wafers, but actually taste good. Like not just a
Ours don't
bland.
taste like anything.
Yeah, it has like a sweet flavor to it. I don't know if there's something that compares to that. But that's always kind of in my mind what it seemed like it was.
Was that the texture that was like white coriander? Because coriander seed is really small. It's like a mustard seed.
I would guess.
They're a little bit bigger than a mustard seed.
So, and then you could do all sorts of things
Like
with it.
water crackers.
Someone want to read that? Some of these. So manna was kind of like the base, and then reads Numbers 11. Shar, you want to read that?
The people went around gathering it and then ground it up in a hand mill and crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into cakes, and it tasted like something made with olive oil.
Yeah. Somewhere the quote was, it wasn't if they were going to eat manna that day, it was how was mom going to prepare the manna that day? Like, oh, is it a bread today? Is it a cake today? Is it like, that's going to be what you eat every day as your carb, but it's just how does mom going to decide to prepare it?
Like hamburger and hamburger helper.
Yeah, right. What flavor hamburger helper today? Quail helper today. I don't know, there's one, just say picture kind of frost on the ground, that's, obviously, we don't know what it looked like, but just kind of, you woke up every morning and that's just,
bad.
you looked out and there it was just covered with God's providence, God raining down bread from heaven every morning.
Never had sense.
Oh, yeah.
So you could eat it raw,
We need it.
you could make oatmeal, maybe that's something you could do with it. You can bake bread, ground it into flour, everything you can do with flour, you could do with manna. But this was the big deal, right? Only take enough for one day. Why? Was that important?
It's very spoiled, huh?
Okay, and if you took more, it's spoiled. But was a spiritual kind of,
God
Lord will
wanted
provide.
them to know that he would provide the next day
Yeah.
too.
don't think in your head, well, what if maybe it's not there tomorrow? I better get enough for the rest of the week. No, if you do, I'm going to make that spoil. Just take what is necessary for today. The total trust thing. Trust I'm going to provide. Tie that in with Matthew 6. I'm going to read that.
I can do it. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
Yeah, preach on that. You ain't kidding. So where do we kind of draw the line? Obviously, Jesus isn't, you wouldn't make the application here, well, go to the store once a day and I will provide for you. And you can buy groceries for the week. It's not the Old Testament principles he had, but where's kind of the line he's drawing in Matthew 6?
Don't obsess about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So give me an example. How would someone how do we maybe sometimes fall into that?
Well, what shall we eat, what shall we wear, they will stock up on stuff and
Yeah.
not trust that. You
The
know.
big toilet paper run of course.
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez.
COVID toilet paper issue. yeah.
Isn't that, I don't know if anybody did that, I'm gonna step on toes, but to me, that was just, it didn't even have anything to do with that part of your body, right? It was an upper respiratory thing, and yet people it's just a sinful nature, right? And I gotta take mine, I wanna make sure I have enough, and now everyone else suffers because
Well, it's just like when we turned in the year 2000, right? Everybody was stocking up then too on stuff.
Yeah.
And you couldn't find things on the shelves. Geez, I only want one can of something, it's gone.
Right. And again, not to say when there's a deal, it's okay to buy 5, whatever, but the point, when you obsess about it, to the point where I don't know if God's gonna provide for me, so I have to provide for myself. There's what Jesus is going at here. God will, he promises he will take care of you. And number 4, right, give us this day our daily bread. That's the one part of the Lord's Prayer that does with our stuff, our earthly stuff. And we trust that he's gonna provide that each and every day. So now we get to the Promised Land. When you see, compared to the Sinai Peninsula, it is a land flowing with milk and honey compared to what they had been in the last 40 years. So from last week, or 2 weeks ago, what's that body of water in the south? Dead Sea. What's the river north of the Dead Sea?
Jordan,
What's the sea up north?
Galilee,
And the sea to the west?
all that.
Mediterranean.
Mediterranean Sea, very good. Then you got Galilee next to the Sea of Galilee to the west, Samaria in the middle, Judah, Jerusalem, Bethlehem down there by the Dead Sea to the west. And all the action right now is going on over in the Gaza, right? That's right on the coast there where the Philistines used to hang out. All right, so they get into the Promised Land, days of Joshua. How about that? Joshua 5? Jude.
The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate of the produce of Canaan.
Okay, so the miraculous provisions stop that day after the Passover when they get to the Promised Land. And God kept his promise to get them to that land flowing with milk and honey. Basic 3 food groups. You hear a few passages talk about wine or grapes, oil, right? Olives and oil. And then there's different kinds of there's grains, right? Bread, barley,
Barley,
wheat.
just said barley.
Yeah,
Psalm 104. Deuteronomy 7, there again, the grain, the new wine, the oil. Seems like these were kind of the main three crops, the grain, the wine, the oil. In a bad sense, when the people, again, had rejected God, well, now I'm going to take away your crops. I'm going to take away your grapes, and I'm going to take away your olives. I'm going to take away your wheat and your barley. Break down the grains a little bit. These were the first to ripen. It was estimated that wheat made up half the diet of a family. We're going to get into meat wasn't fish, kind of, sort of, but they weren't eating a lot of steaks, right? They weren't eating hamburgers. They were very modest. A lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, a lot of wheat, different ways of preparing it. Meat was the food of kings, right? That was what you brought out for the feast, right? Kill the fattened calf, stuff like that. Most Israeli families couldn't afford to eat meat every day.
Most American families can't eat.
Not anymore, right? Barley is kind of the lowest of that was for the poor, that was for the animals. Barley porridge you hear about, with beans, cucumbers, and onions. Not exactly something that tickles my fancy, but I suppose if that's all you know and that's what you grew up with.
Barley is
poor
good though,
Israelite,
and it's good for you.
I have barley in soup sometimes.
Yeah.
Barley soup. I think that's the only time I've ever had barley.
Oh,
Maybe you'd have a chunk of bread, raisins or olives as a snack, right? You think about guys going out to work, read something how, that would be their snack. In the middle of the day under the hot sun, you'd have a little hunk of bread, and you'd have a couple raisins. I'm thinking you had a lot of people in really good shape back then because you didn't eat a lot and you worked a lot. And you didn't sit around and binge Netflix shows. Ruth chapter 2, mealtime, Boaz says, come over here, have some bread, dip it into the wine vinegar. Kind of like a balsamic, right? Maybe like a balsamic vinegar. When she sat down with the harvesters, he offered her some roasted grain. She ate all she wanted and had some left over. That'd be a big deal for someone like Ruth. So I remember Boaz was a wealthy man, wealthy landowner, farmer. Did they have alcohol? Yeah, they sure did. Archaeologists suggest 40% of the barley crops were used for alcohol. So they wouldn't have had distilled like liquors the way we have, but when they talked about strong drink that isn't wine, beer was definitely a thing. Definitely had a lot of beer back in the day.
Yum.
Obviously we know about the wine. You can't exactly preserve it, so it's going to ferment. So fermented grain. A lot of historical evidence on beer back in those days, thousands of years ago. Some of the herbs you hear about.
what's rue? I've not heard of rue.
I haven't either, but I took a picture of it and wrote it down. So I'm gonna look up rue.
Which one is a picture of Rue?
I would have known that 6 years ago when I made this. I know mint is the bottom left. I would guess caraway's the top left. Maybe the bottom right, I would guess, would be, as I look at it.
It is used for digestion problems, loss of appetite, upset stomach, and diarrhea.
There you go.
Where's it native to, Jen?
Pepto-Bismol.
Where is it needed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's the
I've
bottom
never
right
heard of
one.
I never heard of it either.
Native to the Balkan Peninsula.
Okay, that's up like Yugoslavia. That's Mediterranean area. Yep.
Not a common spice, is it? Herb.
No, you don't have to go buy Pepto-Bismol anymore. Just get some rue and probably don't want to eat a whole lot.
Sells it.
Except large doses can cause violent gastric pain, vomiting, liver damage,
I think I
and
gotta
death.
buy Pepto-Bismol.
Maybe I'll stick with that.
That's what it says on Google.
Probably not gonna make a cereal out of it.
Yeah, no. Here, son, eat this. Okay, well, a lot of grapes, right? We talk about figs, dates, olives. A lot of hilly area, so it's perfect for like you go to the vineyards out in California or
Pomegranates in the store right now.
the what's the word? Topography is perfect over there with that climate for growing grapes and grapevines. And, hilly areers you wouldn't be able to exactly till with an ox when the terrain looks like this. So, but grapes are sure going to grow well. Remember when the spies got into the promised land, we hear about the valley of Eshcol. They cut off a branch with a single cluster of grapes and two of them carried it on a pole between them. So for 2 adult men, how big does that cluster of grapes have to be where 2 adult men it took to carry it on a pole? When I lived up in Alaska, up in Wasilla and Fairbanks, they'd have farmers markets in the summer and they just get so much sun up there. They grow huge. Things just grow huge, you know, because they just get all that light and the climate is perfect for some of those things. Harvest time, what a time of joy, right? It means the summer's almost over. This is late summer, early fall in their calendar. What can you do? You can eat them fresh, you can make raisins, you're gonna get the wine process started. They didn't have milk, right? They couldn't preserve milk the way we can, and water.
You wouldn't have made it, honey.
If they had, I mean, you could have it fresh, like right away, but it's not gonna last real long. Water wasn't exactly as easy to come by as it is today. You can't just go to the faucet and think of the process of going to the well and having to get the water in the morning. The women would traditionally do that, so. But you had a bunch of wine. There was
Didn't they
wine.
have cows?
Huh?
Didn't they have cows?
They did.
Why
yeah.
couldn't they have milk?
Well, I'm saying you can, but it's not gonna last real long. You have it fresh and maybe, I don't know, how long does milk, I've never had fresh milk from a cow, but I would assume it doesn't last real long once you kind of drink it right away and.
There's a reason why they pasteurize it.
Right. It's gonna be
Drinking fresh
pretty
milk
rank
and
if
all of a
nothing
sudden,
else.
thing goes down your throat,
Yeah, well,
a slimer.
no thanks.
Thank you, Jim, for that.
After everyone had.
But there was
Just the
a
facts, ma'am.
ton of wine, so you'd have wine with every meal pretty much. Wine was just,
Yay.
that's just what you did. That was the
So
culture.
happy.
So it's not a surprise, like when they had the Passover meal, with every course, he had a glass of wine. And it's just, what it wasn't a big glass, they had a little wine.
So even children can drink.
Yeah,
They do in Europe too, though.
yeah.
Children
Okay.
drink wine in Europe.
Yeah, and there's certainly passages about don't abuse it, but yeah, have a little bit of wine. Very common.
In Germany, it's beer.
In church,
Have beer with the meal?
well, yeah, they pour out some every day with their burnt
Also
offering.
have a lot of wine.
Giving your best back to the Lord, right? Pour out your best. They would use it for trade. You hear about Solomon as he was putting the temple together. One of the currencies he used was vats of wine with some of the nations around Lebanon, I believe, with the cedars and things like that. You bring us your wood and we'll give you some wine in return. Precious commodity. Remember the story of Noah? That's an example of the abuse of it. Remember what happened with Noah after the ark?
Yeah, drunk.
Yeah.
And drunk and.
And the sons would cover him up, you know, and you're kind of embarrassed. Dad had way too much wine. I mean, here's Noah, right? This is this great man of faith, and even a guy like that, after all he had just seen, after God literally destroyed the world and saved him and his family, one of the first things he does is drink too much. This is kind of an interesting passage, Micah. Someone want to read Micah 2? This is God coming down on his people and not listening to the true prophets, but kind of goes to the culture back then.
If a liar and deceiver comes and says, I will prophesy for you plenty of wine and beer, he would be just the prophet for this people.
Yeah, so it goes to the spiritual situation where you don't want to hear what the Lord says, but if a prophet came and said, God's going to give you a bunch of wine and beer, you'd love a prophet like that. That's how corrupt they'd become, that they just cared about earthly stuff, and the next time they could get drunk rather than listening to the words of the prophets. Oh, fig trees. Yeah, Joel 2. Be not afraid, O wild animals. The open pastures are becoming green. Trees are bearing fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their riches.
Pastor,
Yeah, sorry.
what is the difference between a fig and a date?
Wow, I don't know. Google knows.
Trees, I don't know.
A fig and a
I
date.
can tell you about the fig tree. So the fig tree was talked about a lot. They have like big leaves apparently, and it was like you could shelter under a fig tree. So one of the when you want to talk about God blessing you, they'll say things like each man will have his own fig tree. Yeah, it was kind of what would we say today?
Status symbol or something?
Yeah, protection. It was cool. You know, on a hot day, you could sit under a fig tree and get shade. So in a sense, protect. God's going to provide. God's going to provide,
Okay.
and He'll provide for each man's going to have his own fig tree. It's not like we have to split one between the 10 of us and each take a turn. Everyone gets their own. So.
What's the dried up
Figs
plums?
are crunchy while dates are sticky.
Sticky, that's what I thought, yeah, dates are sticky.
Dates contain more sugar than figs.
There you go.
Do they taste the same kind of sort of? No? Crunchy, huh?
That is not the impression.
So Jim, you do the taste testing and let us report back to us next
Well,
week.
I don't know where to buy figs.
Well, now that Christmas is coming, you'll start seeing them in the stores.
Figs and dates.
I think they put them in fruitcake.
Tel Aviv. Over there.
Right.
Maybe get it on Amazon.
You gotta really want them.
They're not chunky like
I
that.
can buy.
There's an example of a fig tree just to kind of show you how you can totally see how you could sit under that and get some shade and take a little nap in the heat of the day. And so Micah 4, again, a prophecy of restoration, a prophecy ultimately of heaven. The day's going to come where everyone gets their own vine and their own fig tree. And that's not something, we hear that and say, well, who cares if you have your own fig tree? Back in those days, would have been, oh, wouldn't that be nice if we had our own fig tree? Here's your dates. The date palm, right?
Not sitting under that for shade, are you?
Probably the palms that were used on Palm Sunday from the date palm tree. Saints in Revelation, remember that story? They have the John seeing heaven and they all have palm branches in their hands. So if you're a Jew living in that time, that seems like the date palm tree would be the palm tree, not like, I don't know, you go to Hawaii or something, and not those palm trees, but, or Southern California, or more like this kind of a palm. There's your olives, and olive oil.
Wonderful olives.
Cooking, baking, for fuel. You hear about it being used for skin load. You think, imagine working out in the hard desert in the day and you come home, your skin's all cracked and you get some olive oil on there to help moisten.
And then you smell good too.
And you smell good too.
These Hawaiian gets in, we're already seasoned.
You hear about it being used to anoint people, right? When the prophets would anoint the next king or the next prophet, the next, they'd pour oil on their head, run down the beard, right? This, now everyone sees you're next. So that's the olive tree. They'd fill the lampstands every night. Why? And then what was the purpose of the light? That it should always be lit. Think of the lampstands in the tabernacle, the temple. Why do they not ever want those lights to go out? Some churches have that, don't they? They'll have like an eternal flame kind of a light they have.
The presence of God.
Yeah, God is never going to depart from you. So even if all the temple activities shut down for the day, God hasn't gone away. So just because the priest isn't there and you can't bring your sacrifices, you can look in and the light, there's the light, right? The light is lit. Okay, we talked about anointing. Yeah, you hear about that before they would light up the grain offering, they'd pour some oil on it and then they'd smoke it up, and another way to express thanksgiving. Gath Shemani, a stone olive press. Guess where that is? Gath Shemani. Gethsemane, there you go. That's the Hebrew for the Garden of Gethsemane, the Garden of Gath Shemani. So that's a place they would often go, and you think you can guess that Gath Shemani had a lot of olive trees out there in that garden. Only the rich ate meat often. For the most common folks, it would just be on religious festivals, aka the Passover, when you'd slaughter the lamb. And so it'd be kind of a special thing. You didn't eat lamb every day, every week, every day, but you get to eat it at Passover time. Most families had a few sheep for meat and wool, a goat or two for cheese. This is just kind of what archaeologists have said and people who've studied. It's not like the Bible talks about how many sheep people had, but from an average Jewish person back in those days, from what they have found, this is probably the norm. That's a fish from the Sea of Galilee there. And most of the fish are more like bluegill size, not giant, muskies or something living in the Sea of Galilee. So it makes you think of feeding of the 5,000, right? He had some bread and a couple of fish, right? Salted, preserved.
Yeah, they're running your,
You either salt it or you eat it now or you salt it. Man.
wasn't salt used as a currency too in some areas?
So we got back from Florida and went to Chicago, and where we got picked up to go back to where we parked, that's where some of the migrants are living in O'Hare. And they have the part that's blocked off by a curtain, but then there were a bunch just sitting out, and they just had flat mats, right? And they're just laying on their mats. And, yeah, they're not, that's life back then. You don't have a nice bed you jump into with your mattress and box spring, right? You lay on the floor, you lay on your mat. That's how you sleep.
Oh, you didn't have running water or electricity.
Right,
or anything.
yeah, the candles or oil, for your light, and water, you go to the well and get it, and it's a different way of life. So these rooms would serve as your kitchen, your dining room, your living room during the day, your bedroom at night. We're gonna get to the diagram. You'd have your animals in a room like right next door. It's not like you had a shed way over there where you kept the animals. They're all like right, and you look at them and everyone here, it's all clumped together. Yeah, if you were really rich, of course, you'd maybe have access to other things, but that is not the life for most people. So picture 10 people in a house, right? Mat to mat, wall to wall. So there's a typical Israelite home. So your entrance, you got your courtyard here in the middle, your living quarters back here. Here's your animals kept there. This is your workshop / kitchen right here, storage. Remember the roof in Acts, when Peter goes up to the roof, right? You go up to the roof in the middle of the day to kind of have your siesta, you take a nap. It's a little cooler up there on the roof, you get a little breeze. More room for animals back there too. So this is maybe an archaeologist, uncovered this. So that's your house. Again, imagine 10 people in there. And this is everything. It's your kitchen, it's your living room, it's where you keep your animals, it's your bedroom at night. Kind of almost ashamed to think of the things we have today. we complain about stuff, and that's what God's people lived in, was stuff like that.
The man and his daughter, I can't think of their last name, but his first name was Stephen, that was at the Word class.
Oh, Batista, yeah. And, yep.
We're saying 9 kids and
Oh, yeah,
them in
that
a RV.
11 of them.
Altogether, yeah, with the parents, that was unreal.
That's a lot of people in a small space.
And even that house that they said they had during the COVID time was tiny. I just can't imagine.
Remember Jesus' parable where the guy comes knocking on the door and asks for a fish or an egg or something at night? The neighbor comes and he says, I can't disturb my family. And I think it makes more sense when you think, well, can't you just go to the fridge and get, no, not the fridge, but go to wherever you stored it and get some, well, if I have to walk over 10 bodies to get it, I can't do that right now. It's late. Everyone's in bed. And it's not like I can go to my little private storage area and grab what you need. All right, talk about the clean and unclean animals. Fish, you have to have fins and scales to be considered clean. Pork, not an option ever. Yeah, no bacon. Remember the 2 restrictions, you had to have the cloven hooves, right? And then you had to be able to chew your own cud. The animals chew their own cud. So the pigs have the first one, but not the second. Well, there you go.
Were there pigs even in the territory?
There were. Think of Jesus when he drives a demon into the pigs, but a Jew would stay away from them.
But they just couldn't, they didn't eat them.
Yeah, they were unclean animals, so you keep your distance from anything unclean.
So they basically just were alive. There was no purpose
wild
for
pigs
pigs.
roaming around. Well, I mean,
Really?
yeah, for the Jews, they certainly.
Killers.
Well,
When it's the scales, are they expected to eat them?
No, they cleaned them, I believe, from what I know. As far as, so I think all these dietary restrictions to me really come down to you don't eat like the bottom dwellers, you don't eat, the animals you don't eat are what? You don't eat like the nasty things, you don't eat the scavengers, yeah, the birds, you don't eat crows, you don't eat ravens, you know. It seems like a lot of it was dietary. This stuff will get you sick, you know. And nowadays we can look back, okay, well, that makes sense. But also to separate them from the nations around them. You are my people, and you are going to live differently than the nations around you. And this is one way you're going to be different than the nations around you. You are clean. I have made you clean. Don't eat unclean things. Yeah, certain birds. If you want to turn to Leviticus 11, that's where it kind of spells out. You don't have to read the whole thing, but pretty close. Leviticus 11, we'll do like 1 through 22, maybe some start with 1 through 12. Charlie,
go ahead, Charlie.
Charlie's got it, 1 through 12.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and told them to tell the Israelites these things. These are the animals that you may eat. Of all the animals, or of all the mammals on land, you may eat any that have hooves with splits in the hooves and that rechew their food. But you are not to eat the following, which only rechew their food or only have hooves. The camel, although it rechews its food, has no hooves. It is unclean for you. Do not eat the rock badger, for although it rechews its food.
You just skip to the animals, you don't have to read them.
All right.
So don't eat the hare, just kind of do that.
All right. Do not eat the hare. Do not eat the pig.
And skip to 9.
These are the creatures you may eat that live in the water. Eat with any that has fins and scales from seas and streams.
Good. Skip to 13. What are the bad birds?
You shall detest any of the following among birds. These are detestable: the eagle, the black vulture, the bearded vulture, the red kite, the black kites of every kind, ravens and crows of every kind, the eagle owl, the short-eared owl, the long-eared owl, all species of hawks, the tawny owl, the fisher owl, the screech owl, the white owl, the scops owl, the osprey, the stork, and all species of herons, hoopoe, and the bat.
And how about the insects?
All winged swarming insects that walk on all fours are detestable.
22.
Of them you may eat the following: of all species of locusts, all species of bald locusts, all species of crickets, and all species of grasshoppers. But all other winged swarming insects that have 4 feet are
And then
detestable.
skip down to 29 and 30.
These are the most unclean for you of the creatures that swarm on the ground: the rat, the mouse, and all species of large lizard, the gecko, the spotted lizard, the skink, and the chameleon. These are the most unclean for you of the creatures that swarm. Whoever touches any of these, they are dead, will remain unclean until sunset.
Okay. So, again, every animal you hear there, you say, yeah, I can see kind of why God wouldn't want them eating that stuff. Sort of makes sense from what those animals consume on a daily basis. Yeah, so we said, one of the purposes we talked about the law in the Old Testament was as a hedge, not just a mirror and a guide, but as a hedge. I want you to be different than the nations around you. You are a custodian of my word, and you are a cradle for my son one day. And you are not to be like the pagan nations around you, to the point where you don't dress like them, you don't eat like them, you are different than them. And you can imagine, and this happened how many times when they start to blend in, when they start to intermarry, when they start to say, really, we're all cousins, we all kind of, it doesn't take long, and they forget about their God. It doesn't take long, and they start taking on their practices rather than the practices God had ordained for them through Moses at Mount Sinai. How about Hosea 13? John, read that one.
I cared for you in the desert, in the land of burning heat. When I fed them, they were satisfied. When they were satisfied, they became proud. Then they forgot me.
Yeah. More things change, the more they stayed the same. That kind of could sound like America. I feed them and they're satisfied, and how quickly they forget me. How quickly they forget where it all comes from. Fast forward to the New Testament, Colossians 2. You got that, Jim?
Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ.
Okay, so that's probably your best proof passage for...
You can eat pork now.
You can eat bacon now. Yeah. If you really want to eat a rock badger, go for it. The long-eared owl or a short-eared owl. However the spirit moves you that
Pass on that.
And any species of hawk. Go right ahead. But yeah, these were all a picture. They were all a shadow. The purpose of Israel has been fulfilled when the word of God was proclaimed and the Christ child came into the world and finished his work. And at that point, all those regulations, once Christ ascended, were no longer necessary, no longer needed.
Yeah. Game warden would like to have a word with you.
Yeah, right. If he's listening, I'm not suggesting.
But it is interesting that a lot of those things people really don't eat.
Still today you wouldn't eat, yeah. You just don't think about, oh,
Eat vultures
Who would
because
want
they
to
eat
eat a
dead
crow?
things.
I'm gonna go
Dead
hunt for
body
some
things.
crow. It'd be easy to hunt for them, but
Yeah.
are you really gonna eat that meat? Where's that thing been? What is it all
They're
eating?
almost
There's some group of people that have moved in as refugees from some country, I don't know exactly where. But they come to the food pantry with Clover.
Okay,
And the only thing they want are fish, but not bottom feeders.
okay.
No lobster, no crab, no
Yep.
salmon, you know.
I think it's a Muslim thing too. They have a very strict dietary restriction. There's only certain fish you can eat, only certain
They
seafood.
had a lot of cod this week.
Quote from Luther, if Adam were to return to the earth, remember Adam lived in a pretty good place in the garden, a perfect garden. If Adam were to return to earth and see the way we live and the food we eat, he'd say, this is not the world I lived in. Yeah, maybe Luther sometimes over-exaggerates, but obviously he'd rather live in a sinless Garden of Eden, but just the blessings we have. And this is 1500s Germany, but he's looking around and saying, what we have compared to what they had back then, it's just not even close. Think of this, King Solomon, richest man in the world. Did he ever have a chariot like your car you drove here today in? Did you know what a treat frozen ice cream is?
But his chariot is still worth more than my car.
His chariot's worth a lot more than your car. And it took him 2 hours to get somewhere you could go in 10 minutes.
I always think of the people before cars were invented, when you're going down the highway at 70, 80 miles an hour, thinking, if you had him in the back seat, he'd probably be going nuts.
Right, slow down. I thought this
20 was fast.
Right, you're cruising at 20. I thought that was an interesting quote. Our garbage disposals eat better than most of the world's population. A lot of truth to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Especially if we go out for Easter brunch or something, and I think about this, and I'm just as guilty, but you taste some, I don't really like that. And you see the servers walking away with plates of like food. It's good food, right? So I just didn't like it. And you know it's just going in the dumpster. You say, wow, someone from the middle of India would just be salivating to me.
Well, it's just like water, you wash your dishes and sometimes you keep the faucet running when you're rinsing the dishes and
Yeah.
you're thinking, oh my goodness, there's people that don't even have a cup of water to drink.
Right.
And all that water that you keep wasting.
Yeah, we're just so used to it. Just press a button and the light comes on and turn on your water and there's fresh water to drink. And don't have to work for any of it. And Satan knows that, right? He totally is out to rob us of our thankfulness. That's a Thanksgiving sermon once. Imagine if God took away the things you weren't thankful for today, the things you didn't say thank you for today, what would you have left on a basic day? Would there be a lot of days I don't think I'd have much of anything? Because you just take it for granted. It's just going to be there. Yeah. Try to make us ungrateful. We never forget where our daily bread comes from. But more than that, the point of all this, don't forget who the bread of life is, the ultimate capital B bread who supplies all these things for you. That's what he does. That's what he's always done, taking care of his people's earthly needs. So to the sheets, I know we kind of skipped around there. Look at number, how about 3, 4, and food in the promised land on page 1. So as you think about the foods they ate, and what does it say about their diet?
Healthy.
I picture very healthy people. I don't think a lot of them had heart attacks at 50 years old, right? They they didn't eat those things that would cause them to have those issues that many of us have today. Compare that to what we eat and all the junk and preservatives and crud that you look at a list of ingredients and what do they say in the grocery store? You should shop on the outside and not the inside or something like all the good stuff's on the produce and the more in you get, the more it's going to be filled with stuff that makes it taste good. But
They had more natural stuff back then. They didn't have all the processed foods we have today.
right, yeah, no canned goods and things like that.
Plus, like you said before, they worked harder physically.
They didn't have time to sit. Yeah, they working 12 hours a day. How about 7? If God asked us to live that way, how would you react?
You'd probably grumble and complain too.
Probably be a lot like the Israelites, right? I remember when in Egypt we used to have food and meat and all we wanted, and now you're taking it all away.
The good thing is we'd lose weight.
We would very quickly. That would be an easy way to lose weight.
Mediterranean.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet, there you go. Number 10, we kind of talked about, obviously. It's a blessing to have a higher standard of living, but understand the devil's going to use those as a means to...
It's a double-edged sword.
Double-edged sword, exactly. Go to page 3, attitudes regarding God's providence. Numbers 11, 4 through 6, I got it right here. The foreign rabble who were among the Israelites were overcome by their craving. The Israelites also wept once again and said, "Who's going to give us meat to eat? We remember the fish we ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Now our lives are wasting away. We have nothing at all to look at except this manna." So you see how their priorities so quickly, this miraculous food literally falling from heaven, didn't take long. And suddenly you forget about the God who provides. Anything else on chapter 4? Again, not a lot of real deep theological stuff, but gives you a little overview of what an average Israelite would have, what their diet would have been like, their living conditions would have been like. All right. Next week, the chapter is titled Living Under Law and Gospel. Living Under Law and Gospel. So we get back into some little deeper things. All right, we'll just close with the blessing then. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen. Thank you all.